I still remember the moment I found out. It's like the world paused, then suddenly spun out of control. I was digging through her closet, stupid, I know, but I was desperate to understand why she'd been so distant lately. I didn't want to believe she was hiding something, so I went through her things. That's when I saw the note. Not just a text, but a handwritten note tucked inside an old journal. It read, "Meet me at the park tonight. I need to see you. Love you always." My heart jumped and I swear my palms went clammy. I stared at it like it was a bomb about to go off. I could feel my stomach tighten like I'd swallowed a rock. How long had this been going on? I looked closer and that's when I saw the unfamiliar lipstick stain on the note, smeared just enough to be unmistakable. I figured, okay, I need to see her. I called her that night, voice trembling, trying to sound casual. "Hey, what's this about the park? Who's meeting you?" There was a long silence, then she laughed, too casual. "Oh, that, just a friend, you know I've been stressed, nothing to worry about." The way she said it, I knew she was lying, but I wanted to believe her. I clung to that hope, told myself maybe it was just a misunderstanding. A few days later, I decided to follow her. I followed her car through the neighborhood into the city until it stopped at a little cafe near the river. I parked a few blocks away, heart pounding in my chest. I watched her meet someone tall with dark hair and a crooked grin I'd never seen before. They hugged and she kissed him on the cheek. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed hidden behind a row of trees, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. That's when I saw the way they touched, her hand on his knee, her face lit with a smile that didn't belong to a woman in a happy marriage. It was lust and betrayal all wrapped into one. When they finally left, I followed at a distance, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't need to hear their words to know what had transpired. The proof was in the way she looked at him. The way she laughed at his stupid jokes, the way she clung to him in a way she'd never cling to me anymore. I felt sick, like I'd been punched in the stomach, then dragged through a mud pit. I couldn't breathe right, my vision blurred, and I knew this was the moment I had to decide what I'd do next. Back at home, I sat on the edge of the bed, cold sweat soaking my shirt. My hands trembled as I held the evidence. The note, the photos I'd secretly snapped. I looked at her phone, thought about confronting her right then and there, but I hesitated. I needed a plan. I couldn't just blow everything up without thinking. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, radiating happiness with him. I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind to the red flags. God, the tension in my chest refused to loosen. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. I had to think carefully about what I was going to do next. When I finally decided to act, I was cold and methodical. No screaming, no shouting, just a plan. I'd gather more proof, confront her, and then when she least expects it, I'd make her regret the day she decided to cheat. I didn't want to be reckless, but I also couldn't let her get away with this. The betrayal had cut too deep, and I wasn't about to let her keep hiding behind her lies. I felt my jaw tighten as I stared at the evidence. I had to be smart. I had to be ruthless. Because if I didn't, she'd think she could do this forever. I would make sure she paid. And that's when I realized this was the start of my revenge. After I collected myself that night, I spent the next few days devising exactly how I'd handle this. I needed more than just the note and some stolen photos. I needed undeniable proof, something that would make her admit everything without a shred of doubt. I wasn't planning to just confront her blindly. I wanted her to feel the weight of her lies, to see her fall apart when the truth was laid bare. I started monitoring her phone, sneaking into her emails, her social media accounts. It was sickening, really, how easy it was to find the cracks in her facade once I started digging. I found messages, flirty remarks, secret emojis, plans to meet up again. It was clear she was still lying, still sneaking around even after the initial sightings. One night, I got into her email account. I hadn't planned it, but I couldn't resist. I needed to know how deep her betrayal went. I scrolled through her messages, and my stomach dropped when I saw her talking about him like he was her world. There were plans to meet, promises of forever, even talk about ending everything with me once they were free. The words burned like acid in my throat. I clenched my fists, feeling the familiar heat of rage. How could she do this? I whispered aloud, then slammed my fist into the wall. I was furious, yes, but I knew I had to stay cold. If I lost control now, I'd ruin everything. I decided to set a trap. I created a fake email account, one that would look like a new flirtation from someone she'd be tempted to respond to. I sent a message pretending to be someone interested, flirty, suggestive, pushing her buttons. I knew she'd take the bait, and she did. Within days, I had her replying with messages that confirmed her ongoing affair, even talking about meeting again. I printed everything out, keeping it hidden for now. My plan was to corner her with undeniable evidence, make her own words condemn her. I wanted her to see she'd been caught red-handed, not just in a lie but in a pattern of betrayal. But I wasn't just planning to confront her empty-handed. I wanted to hit her where it hurt most. I'd taken screenshots of her messages, saved her secret plans, and even recorded her calls, just in case I needed to remind her she'd been caught. I was meticulous, cold, and intent on making her realize she'd lost control of the situation. The day of the confrontation loomed, but I waited. I wanted her to feel the weight of this, to sit through the moment where I'd reveal everything I'd uncovered. I wanted her to squirm and beg, but I also knew I wouldn't be gentle. No, I'd make her own lies turn against her. One afternoon, I told her I needed to talk, just the two of us. She looked nervous, probably sensing. I knew something. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I kept my voice steady, cold even. We need to talk about your recent behavior. I've found some things that don't add up. I handed her the printed messages, the screenshots, the recordings. Her face crumbled, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't mean for you to find out like this, she whispered, trembling. I shook my head. You lied to me for months. I saw the photos, the messages. Do you think I'd be stupid enough not to notice? Her hands shook as she tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. That's when I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. No more hiding behind the lies. It was time to finish this. I told her I was done, that I'd had enough of her betrayal. I explained my plan for what was coming next, her losing everything she cared about, her reputation, her marriage. I was calm, but inside I was seething. She begged for forgiveness, crying and apologizing, but I wasn't moved. I simply told her, you made your choices. Now I'm making mine. I turned away and left her standing there, devastated and defeated. As I walked out, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with a cold resolve. I had gathered enough evidence, and I was ready to make her pay. She could beg, scream, cry, nothing would undo what she'd done. This was just the beginning of her downfall. I closed the door behind me and felt my stomach tighten again. I knew I'd crossed a line, but at this point it didn't matter. The betrayal was too deep, and she needed to understand consequences. I decided I'd give her a week to think about her choices. After that, I'd execute the next phase of my plan. It was time she saw what real revenge looked like, and I was going to make sure she'd never forget it. The silence in the apartment was deafening after I handed her the evidence. She sat trembling on the couch, tears streaming down her face, trying to find words that wouldn't come. Her hands clutched at her lap like she was holding on to her last shred of dignity, but it was already gone. I stood there, feeling the weight of everything. My anger, the betrayal, the sick satisfaction that I was finally in control after months of feeling powerless. I told you I'd find out, I said coldly. This isn't just a mistake she'll apologize for and forget. You cheated, lied to my face for months. How could you do this? How could you think I wouldn't find out? Her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened. I was stupid. Stupid. No, I cut her off. You were selfish. You thought you could keep hiding it, keep lying, and I'd never see the truth. Well, I did, and now I'm done. She looked desperate, eyes pleading, but I wasn't feeling generous anymore. I had spent days planning, gathering evidence, imagining this moment. I knew exactly what I wanted her to feel. The shock, the shame, the realization that she'd lost everything. I've been thinking about what to do next, I said, voice low, steady, because I don't want to just walk away and pretend this didn't happen. No, I want her to suffer just a little, enough to understand she's lost control. Her lips trembled. Please don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake, I swear. I don't want your apologies, I said sharply. I want her to understand how serious this is, how much she's hurt me. She looked down, tears pooling in her eyes. I saw her clutch her hands tightly like she was trying to hold herself together. That's when I knew I needed to up the ante. I'd already proved she was unfaithful. Now it was time for her to realize how far I was willing to go. Over the next few days, I meticulously set my plan into motion. I knew she'd be out of the apartment for a few hours each afternoon. That was perfect. I arranged for a few discreet things to happen, small but impactful enough to leave her shaken. First, I planted a hidden camera in the living room, just enough to capture her reaction if she ever walked into it. I didn't want her to think I was just bluffing. I knew I'd catch her in more lies. I also contacted her closest friends, warning them in vague terms that she'd been unfaithful and that I was considering how to handle it. I didn't give specifics, but I made it clear. I had enough to ruin her reputation if I wanted. On the third day, I left her a note on her pillow. Simple, direct. You're going to regret this, be ready. I kept my voice cold, controlled. I wanted her to feel the sense of impending doom, like she was already losing her grip. That afternoon, she came home, visibly tense. Her eyes darted around like she sensed something was wrong but didn't know what. As she entered the apartment, I was waiting in the living room, not saying a word. Froze when she saw the camera, her face draining of color. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I asked. "That I wouldn't catch you?" She staggered back, voice trembling. "Please, I didn't mean for it to get this far. I swear I thought I could hide it, just a fling, nothing serious." "No," I interrupted. "You lied for months. While I was at work, while I was sleeping next to you, you were with him. I have the proof, and I want her to see it." Her eyes widened as I pressed play on my phone. The footage was clear, her walking into the apartment the moment she thought she was alone, her laughing with him, how close they were, how comfortable. She stared at it, frozen, her breath hitching. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. My voice was cold yet steady. "I want her to know what she's lost. I want her to see the truth. And I want her to understand that I'm not just going to forgive you and move on. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She sank to her knees, sobbing. "Please, don't do this." I was weak. I didn't mean to hurt you. I took a deep breath, feeling the tightness in my chest. This was just the beginning. I'd already decided her punishment would be fitting, but I needed her to understand the full weight of what she'd done. I wanted her to feel helpless, humiliated, and afraid. "Get out," I finally said. "Pack your things. You've broken what little trust we had. I'll be calling someone to help you find a new place. And don't think I'll ever forget this. Never." She looked up, eyes full of despair. "You're serious? You're throwing me out?" "Yeah," I said, voice sharp. "You made your choice. Now live with it." As she packed her bags, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. Revenge wasn't supposed to feel this cold, this calculated, but I knew I'd made sure she'd never look at me the same way again. And that was the point. This was her downfall, and I was going to watch every second of it. When she finally left, I watched her walk out the door, keys in hand, tears streaming down her face. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. It was done. She was gone. And I realized one thing: no matter how much it hurt, I'd taken back my power. And that felt like the only thing I truly needed to survive this mess. The silence after she left was almost worse than the chaos leading up to it. I stood there, feeling that strange rush of victory mixed with an odd emptiness. The apartment was suddenly too quiet, too still. For a few moments, I just stared at the door, listening for any sound, anything that would tell me she was still somewhere nearby, waiting to come back and twist the knife even further. But there was nothing. I knew I had to keep my composure. I had already made my move, cut her loose, and shown her there was no going back. Still, lying there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into a new chapter, one I wasn't prepared for, even if I'd planned every step. I started to clean up the evidence I'd left behind, wiping down surfaces, deleting files from my phone. I didn't want her to think I was obsessing over her. No, I needed to act like I was already moving on, even if my mind was racing. I knew I had to project strength, but honestly, every part of me screamed for a moment of relief and then guilt. That night I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The betrayal, her tears, her begging. It was like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. I wondered if she truly understood what she'd lost, if she realized what her lies had cost her. Deep down, I hoped she never could. But I also knew I needed to do more. I couldn't just leave her to stew in her shame. I wanted her to feel the full impact of her choices, to be haunted by them. That's when the idea hit me. If she wanted to run away, I'd make sure she'd never escape her own guilt. I'd make her regret ever crossing me. The next day, I started working on my plan to make her regret her betrayal, something subtle, something she wouldn't suspect right away. I reached out to a few of her friends, the ones I knew she'd confided in. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to make her feel exposed. I told them she'd been unfaithful and I needed their support, their discretion. I knew they'd be cautious, but I also knew they wouldn't stand for her dishonesty. Next, I changed my routine. I took a different route to work, kept my phone closed, and made sure I was seen talking to some of my contacts, just enough to send a message. I was still in control. I wanted her to feel the chaos ripple through her social circle, to see her reputation start to crack. Meanwhile, I started planting tiny hints around the apartment. A single lipstick stain on her pillow, a misplaced item that could be mistaken for tampering. I wanted her to feel paranoid, to think that I was everywhere, watching her, even if I was. The goal wasn't just revenge anymore. It was about breaking her completely so she'd know she couldn't hide from what she'd done. One evening, I left a note on her pillow, just in case she came back or tried to contact me. Simple, straightforward. You lost me. You lose everything. Don't come back. I didn't sign it. I wanted her to wonder who had left it, if it was me or someone else. The ambiguity added that extra edge of psychological torment I craved. That night, I could feel my heartbeat pounding. I was on edge, waiting for her to call, to come crawling back, but I knew better. No, this wasn't about regrets or apologies. This was about her realizing she'd burned every bridge, her trust, her marriage, her reputation, all gone. I'd made damn sure of that. By the time she'd been gone for a full week, I could see the cracks in her life starting to show. Mutual friends stopped returning her calls, and I even heard whispers about her in the office. Good. I wanted her to feel isolated, to understand that her actions had consequences far beyond just me. And I'd done all of that, without a single scream, without a violent confrontation. Just cold, calculated moves, slowly dismantling everything she'd built. I was proud of how I'd kept my composure. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Now I just had to wait. Wait until she fully realized what she'd lost. Because once she did, I was going to be ready to finish what I started. And I knew deep down that this was only the beginning of her downfall. The waiting felt like torture. I watched as her social circle shrank, as friends she'd relied on suddenly became distant. I'd kept a low profile, but I made sure she knew I was still present, still watching. Every morning, I'd check her social media, her texts, just to see if she'd slipped up, made some mistake. I wasn't after revenge for that anymore. I wanted her to realize she'd lost her footing entirely. One evening, I found her sitting alone in a corner of the local cafe, looking exhausted, defeated. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her hands trembled as she sipped her coffee. I got close enough to hear her whisper to herself, "What did I do?" I didn't say anything at first. Instead, I just watched her for a moment. Then I approached her slowly, sauntering over like I was just another customer. She looked up, startled, her face paling even more. "Hey," I said softly, voice more controlled than I felt. "Been a while." She swallowed hard, trying to compose herself. "What are you doing here?" "Same as you, I guess," I replied. "Watching." Her eyes darted around nervously. "You don't have to do this." "Oh, but I do," I shot back. "You think I'd let you walk away after everything you've done?" Her face twisted in a mix of guilt and defiance. "Please, just leave me alone. I don't want to talk about this." I shook my head slowly. "No, not yet. You need to understand what's happened. You thought you could hide this forever, right? That I'd never catch on, but I did. And I want to remind you of what you've lost." She looked down, biting her lips so hard I thought she'd draw blood. "It's not what you think. It wasn't supposed to go this far." "Oh, I think I understand perfectly," I said. "You betrayed me, lied to my face, and now you're trying to pretend it was nothing. You're trying to pretend you're innocent, but you're not. You're just scared, that's all. And honestly, I don't blame you." Her jaw clenched. "You're just trying to hurt me, that's all this is." "Maybe," I admitted. "But I also want you to feel it, every single bit of it. Because trust me, you're about to find out what it really costs to betray someone like me." She looked away, tears threatening to spill over again. I could see the internal chaos on her face, guilt, fear, maybe even regret. But I also saw the flicker of stubbornness. She thought she could come back, fix this, maybe even convince me to forgive her. Well, I wasn't about to let that happen. Not anymore. I'd waited long enough. Now I was ready to push her over the edge, until there was nothing left but the truth she couldn't run from. "I've got one last thing to show you," I said, pulling out my phone. I had recorded some of her calls, her conversations with him. "You see, I've been watching from the outside for a while now, and I've got proof that you knew exactly what you were doing, how you planned this, how you lied every step of the way." Her eyes widened as I played the recordings, her voice trembling, admitting her feelings, her plans, the words she'd spoken in secret, thinking no one knew. It was proof she couldn't deny anymore. She finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please," she begged, voice cracking. "Don't do this. I was weak. I made a mistake." I took a deep breath, feeling the cold sting of satisfaction. "Too late for apologies," I said quietly. "You're done, just like that. You lost everything." She looked shattered, broken in ways I'd never seen before. Her hands shook as she reached out, desperate for some kind of mercy. But I stepped back, firm, unyielding. "I want you out of my life," I said finally. "And I want you to remember this moment, because it's the last time you'll ever get to hurt me." She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're going to throw me away after everything." "Exactly," I said. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine, and I promise you won't forget it." I turned away, feeling the weight lift just slightly. But this wasn't just about revenge, it was about taking back control. I had to draw the line somewhere, and this was it. As she got up and walked out, I watched her disappear into the night, knowing she'd carry this with her forever. And I finally allowed myself to breathe, because I'd done what I set out to do. I'd made her see the damage she'd caused, and that, I realized, was the real victory. The days that followed felt strange, calm, almost too calm. I kept busy with work, with routines, with pretending that I wasn't still burning from everything I'd uncovered. Inside, I was a mixture of relief and bitterness. Relief that I'd finally taken control, but bitterness because I knew this pain wasn't just going to fade away. It would stay with me, a scar I carried forever. I went through the motions of packing her things. I put her clothes in boxes, carefully not to tear anything, but my hands clenched so tight that my knuckles turned white. Every item I packed felt like a small act of revenge, each one a reminder that she was gone, that she had betrayed everything we built together. I handed her the keys to the apartment that morning. Her face was hollow, stripped of all emotion. I watched her walk out the door, her steps slow, almost like she was dragging herself through water. I didn't say a word. I just watched her go, feeling the weight of what I'd done settle deep in my chest. When she was finally gone, I sat alone in the quiet apartment. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. I looked around at the empty space, the silence almost deafening, and I realized something: I was free. Not just from her lies, but from the constant anxiety, the feeling of being betrayed, the endless guessing. That moment of clarity hit hard. I knew I'd done what I needed to do. I'd reclaimed my dignity, my strength, and my peace. I had set a trap, caught her in her own web, and finally made her see what her betrayal had cost her. I'd won in my own way. There was no more pretending, no more hiding. I'd taken back what was mine. Standing there, I felt a strange sense of closure. The revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about ending this chapter of my life with my head held high. I didn't need her apology, her regret, her tears. I only needed to know I was the one who finally took control. Later that day, I filed the divorce papers. I didn't ask for much, no grand declarations, no long speeches. Just a simple, straightforward act to cut the cord completely. I handed over the papers, signed my name, and watched as everything legally came to an end. The finality of it all was almost surreal. I felt lighter, like I'd shed a heavy shroud I'd been carrying for too long. Standing outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath and looked at the sky. The sun was shining, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally reclaimed my life. That's what mattered. Walking away that day, I kept one thought in mind. Revenge isn't always about destruction. It can be about reclaiming your Peace. About knowing that no matter how badly someone hurts you, you have the power to take that pain and turn it into your strength. I closed the chapter on her and this betrayal forever, and I moved forward one step at a time, knowing I'd survived something that almost broke me and come out stronger on the other side.